So, dear Prime Minister Lenkov, dear students of София University, добре дошли в школе ученицы. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you in the heart of Sofia. I'm honored to speak before you, the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and doers who will shape the future of our region and beyond. You know, it's always a big challenge for me to speak to students. You know, for my short and accidental political career, I learned how to speak to, I don't know, Ursula von der Leyen or Chancellor Scholz, but speaking to students will always make me nervous. Now, you might wonder what brings me all the way to this historic place. Coming to Sofia is not just visit. It is a bridge-building mission. I came here to restore relations between our nations. It has happened that despite our similar history and geographical proximity, we know very little about each other. And this is due to the dictatorship in Belarus, which led into isolation of my country for almost 30 years. And my task is to rebuild everything that was destroyed by the regime. Yesterday I was in the studio of BNT. The presenter Boyka Vasiliev told me that the last time he interviewed the Belarus delegation was back in 1993. It was Stanislav Shushkevich, the first leader of independent Belarus, just a year before the dictator Lukashenko came to power, dismissed the parliament and established the dictatorship which lasts till now. It is symbolic that Shushkevich's 29-year-old granddaughter was repressed by Lukashenko's regime, jailed and forced into exile, and now she is working in my office. It is symbolic but also tragic that several generations of Belarusians didn't have a chance to live in freedom and democracy. I know that not only Belarusians are following my visit to Bulgaria, but also Lukashenko's KGB. After today's meeting with the Bulgarian Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, I'm expecting to see the tweet by Lukashenko's embassy strongly condemning Bulgarians' betrayal. In their eyes, in the eyes of Putin's puppet regime, Bulgaria is the part of the Russian sphere of influence. This means that you don't have the right to your own policy independent of the metropole. They live there in the past, and what's more, they drag us and you into this past too. Bulgarians know very well what it is to live in the shadow of empire. You survived the dark times of fascist and communist dictatorships. You survived centuries of Ottoman yoke. And you know the price of freedom, how easy to lose it and how difficult to get it back. For many people in the Western democracies, it's hard to understand it. For many, democracy is like an air. You just breathe it. And when it is not there, you start to suffocate. The political uncertainties, like the one you're facing right now with your government, are also part of democracy. It can be frustrating, but it's the part of process. And believe me, it is better than dictatorship when a decision has already been made for you. And it is my dream that Belarus would also have such heated debates as you have in parliament right now. Better that way than sterile silence. I'm also proud that Belarusians contributed to Bulgarian freedom. 2 days ago, you celebrated Liberation Day. And one of those who liberated Sofia was General Gurka, Belarusian nobleman and officer who fought in Russian army back then. Here in Bulgaria there are monuments and streets named after him. Another Belarusian freedom fighter fighting for Bulgaria was Nikolai Sudilovsky, known by his nickname Nicholas Russell. Born in Belarus, the outstanding doctor, ethnographer, linguist and writer fell in love with Bulgaria. And he was one of the organizers of the April uprising against the Ottoman Empire. And now, unlike other Belarusians fighting for Bulgaria, he survived. And now his name, like Gurkas, became a symbol of Bulgarian-Belarusian friendship. You know, I'm telling you all this to show not only the ties between Bulgarian and Belarusian people, but also to show that the fight for freedom is not the local one, but the global one. Because tyranny is like cancer. If it's not contained, it's growing and destroying everything on its path. And this is why it's very important to support those who fight against tyranny and dictatorship, and no matter where it happens. This is why it's so important to support Ukraine today, which is fighting not just for their freedom, but for the freedom of all the continent, for the very values Europe is built on. This is why it's so important to support Belarusian fight for freedom. It's not only our fight for human rights and justice, but for the peace and security of the whole Europe. Dear friends, I have touched on this before, but it's impressive to see so many parallels in the history of our countries. I've got a lot to learn from each other. You know, Bulgaria already made its way to democracy, and now it's our turn to hit that road. For 200 years, Belarus was part of the Russian Empire and later of Soviet Empire. Many times we tried to uprise, and many times our uprisings were toppled in blood. Finally, in 1991, we became independent. And actually, Bulgaria was one of the countries to establish relations with Belarus. But the period of democracy lasted only 4 years before a chief of Soviet state farm, Mr. Lukashenko, was elected president. With the help of Russia, Lukashenko started to build the dictatorial regime. He attacked Belarusian culture, language, and true history. Probably he is the only dictator who voluntarily gave up sovereignty of the country. He was even dreaming to become Russian president, and everything Belarusian and European was foreign to him. But 3 years ago, in 2020, everything changed in my country. It changed for me and it changed for Belarus. The last drop was that he totally denied the COVID pandemic. Dictator said that people should drink vodka for protection. When people started to die, he declared that it was their own fault. And huge popular movement began to form around new leaders. And one of them was my husband, Светлана Тихановская, a popular video blogger. He was a YouTuber making videos about the real situation in Belarus, about real problems of the people. And at some point, he became so popular that he decided to run for presidency. When he announced about his decision, he immediately, KGB, arrested Sergei to prevent him from being registered as a candidate. Frankly, I was shocked. I wasn't an activist, just a simple mother of two. I dedicated most of my life to raising up children, and I never wanted to become a politician. But I wanted at that moment to support my husband, Sergei, and so I decided to run instead of him. And I did it out of love. And to my big surprise, I was registered as a candidate. I think that Lukashenko registered me as a joke. He said that our constitution wasn't for a woman, and that a woman cannot be president of our country. But he was wrong. You know, Belarusian society was really more mature than him. In 2020, we quickly united opposition forces. It took us 15 minutes with other female leaders to make the deal. Together, we rallied all over the country, and thousands of people came to support me and to support democratic changes of Belarus. And on the day of elections, it became evident that Lukashenko was losing, and we, Belarusians, were winning. And Lukashenko was in shock. You know, he ordered his commissions to destroy the ballots immediately in order not to allow the recounting of the votes. He declared himself as a winner and brought the police out. People went out to the streets to defend their victory, our victory. The dictator unleashed the most brutal terror against Belarusians since Stalin's time to defend his power. The police were shooting unarmed people. Many got arrested. In prisons, people were tortured and raped with batons. More than 60,000 landed in jails. And Lukashenko built concentration camp near Minsk because his prisons lacked capacity for so many people. All these fascist practices took place in the 21st century in the middle of Europe. Dozens were killed. They were killed on the streets by police or beaten to death in prisons. At that moment, KGB called me and told me clearly, either I leave the country now or I will never see my children again. And it wasn't actually a choice. They brought me to the border with Lithuania, hoping that it would stop the protests in Belarus. But protests didn't stop, and the resistance that started back then continues till now. You know, Lukashenko's regime wouldn't survive without Russia's help. When protests sparked, it was Russia who sent money and people to help Lukashenko. Many employees from the state TV quit their jobs, and Russians came on their place. It seems already then that Putin was planning an invasion of Ukraine. And if Belarus becomes free and European, all his plans on restoring the big Russian empire will be ruined. And Belarus started to resemble a Russian colony. Putin brought his troops to Belarus. Political parties, NGOs and media were banned in our country. And any protests or displaying symbols became illegal. Even speaking Belarusian language in Belarus became a crime. This is what they are trying to do on occupied territories in Ukraine. They want to destroy national identity and make everyone and everything Russian. After Putin secured his control over Belarus with the help of a homegrown dictator Lukashenko, he went to Ukraine. And the first attack on Ukraine started from Belarus territory because it is the shortest way to Kiev. Many Belarusians have been fighting for Ukraine since the invasion. In Ukraine, as volunteers on the front lines, and in Belarus, sabotaging railways to stop Russian army transports. Thanks to the courage of Ukrainians and Belarusians, the Russian plans failed. The first part of their plan to subdue Belarus failed too. For more than 3 years now, Belarusians have been resisting the illegal regime and that usurped power in Belarus. In the wartime, the protest is not so visible as it was in 2020. You can't see big, beautiful rallies because it's too dangerous at the moment. But in spite of it all, Belarusians still resist. The partisans carried out many sabotage acts, such as a drone attack on the huge Russian military scout plane in February last year. People sent information about Russian troops' movements to Ukrainian intelligence. Many honest people within the military, police and even government keep sending us insider information about the regime. Those who managed to get out of the country donate money to our political prisoners. And last summer we collected €500,000 in just 2 days for political prisoners' families. Many Belarusian volunteers are fighting Russian invaders in Ukraine. About 40 of them gave their lives for freedom of Ukraine, but also Belarus. And the mother of one of the volunteers who was killed on the battlefield, Natalia, went to Ukraine and became a caring mother for the comrades. They all know that the Ukraine fight is also our fight. You know, sometimes I hear from Western politicians that first Ukraine must win this war and then we will deal with Belarus. But I believe that changes in Belarus can happen even earlier. Lukashenko's regime is unstable and doesn't have any popular support. If it begins to crumble, it can also open the window of opportunity for Ukraine too. Changes in Belarus can also spark changes in Russia, as we already saw in 2020 when our protests inspired Russians in Khabarovsk and many other cities. And Belarus shouldn't be overlooked. It's a crucial importance for Putin's war machine, but it's also the weakest link. Therefore, at my meetings here in Sofia, I ask Bulgarian politicians to pay more attention to Belarus and support our fight for freedom, as many years ago Belarusians supported yours. Dear friends, sometimes I hear voices who propose to make a deal with Putin and Lukashenko. Let's give them what they want. They say, we need to end the war. But will it end the war if you give the dictators what they want? I think no, it will only embolden them. You just give them more time to regroup and strike with double power. Sometimes I hear about fatigue. Fatigue about war, fatigue about Belarus, and I hear it so often that there is already fatigue of fatigue. You know, tell about fatigue to people in Lukashenko's KGB cells. Tell about fatigue to soldiers in cold Ukrainian trenches. They don't have right to fatigue. Neither do we. And sometimes I see that politicians choose not the most efficient solutions, but the safest one, avoiding risks, avoiding mistakes, and avoiding responsibility. At the peak of our protests in 2020, I remember that undecisiveness. It took 9 months to adopt serious sanctions against Lukashenko, and it happened only when the dictator hijacked a commercial flight with a journalist on board. But the moment was lost already. And sometimes politicians try to close the issue but not to solve the problem. This is what allowed Lukashenko to reign for 30 years. It was easier to close your eyes on human rights and make business as usual. And sometimes I hear that democratic countries don't have enough tools or institutions, but we have them. But what we need now is the courage to use them effectively. This means applying sanctions, not just as symbolic measures, but as strategic tool. It means making them effective and closing loopholes. It means supporting freedom fighters, independent media, and civil society. It means providing full support to Ukraine and Belarus out of the recognition that this is our common fight. It means launching investigations in international courts to prevent any sense of impunity. You know, I do believe that Bulgaria can make a difference. Your history, your experience, and your understanding of what tyranny is your great advantage. So be our voice on international stage and join our fight for freedom. It is a fight that requires support and solidarity, and I especially appeal here to you, my dear students. The Belarusian fight for democracy has been led by young people who stood up against oppression, demanding changes and better future. And these are young people just like you, who dream of living in a country where their voices matter, where their votes count, and where their rights are respected. As I said in the beginning, I came here with a bridge building mission. So help me to build these bridges. And I call on you to establish connections with the Belarusian young people and students community. Organize Belarusian and Bulgarian events here in the university. Dedicate some events or exhibitions to Belarusian political prisoners or our fight for freedom. In Minsk, many students studied Bulgarian language. Perhaps some of you wish to learn some Belarusian as well. So let's translate literature and bring our cultures closer. While Lukashenko and Putin are trying to destroy our national identity and isolate Belarus from the rest of Europe, our connections should be even more stronger. I also call you to join our Day of Solidarity with Belarus on March 25. It's Belarus Freedom Day, when our country got free after a century of the Russian Empire. It's equally important for us as Bulgaria Liberation Day is important to you. The day when we celebrate the freedom-loving spirit of our nations. So let's celebrate this Belarusian-Bulgarian friendship. This is the kind of friendship that no dictator and no tyranny can stifle. As Bulgarians say, unity makes strength. Thank you.